Indiana Corn Growers Association and Indiana Soybean Alliance present Indiana Ag Policy with your host, Eric Pfeiffer.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of the Indiana Ag Policy Podcast. I'm Eric Pfeiffer. Glad to have you along. It's been a little while since we've done an Ag Policy Podcast, and a big reason for that is there's been some changes here in the political landscape of the state. Largely, the two big ag organizations have had changes at the top for their policy organizations, and we welcome one of them today. Indiana Farm Bureau Director of Public Policy is here. Katie Nelson joins us. Katie, thank you for joining us here on the Ag Policy Podcast. And you and I, we go back a little bit. We've known each other for a while, but wanted to take this opportunity to introduce you to some other folks around the state, some Farm Bureau members that maybe haven't met you yet, and let you kind of introduce yourself to them. So please go ahead, I don't have all your credentials here. I didn't write them down. You go ahead.
The list isn't that long, Eric. Thank you for having me. Good to see you. Thanks for having us on. Excited to talk about our priorities today. As you said, my name is Katie Nelson, and I am the new Executive Director for Public Policy here at Indiana Farm Bureau. Been on the job a little over 2 months, and I'm really loving it so far. I'm a farm girl from Missouri. My dad and brother and family still farm there. And I'm just so excited and feel very blessed that I get to represent agriculture in this position. Previously, I was at Department of Agriculture for a little over 8 years, serving in a variety of different roles, most recently as Deputy Director for the agency, and before that as Director of Legislative Affairs. Have always worked, side by side with Farm Bureau on agriculture policy, and I'm now just excited to be a part of the team.
Well, and we do want to say, congratulations and farewell to Andy Tower, who previously held this position there at Indiana Farm Bureau. He just left us high and dry, but it's fine. I wish him the very best of luck. Katie, as we talk about your time spent with the Department of Agriculture, it was a long time you were there, and you were the public policy person there for many years, talking about policy happening. Just kind of give an overview of your time there, maybe some of your biggest accomplishments that you felt while you were there at the department.
Thank you. Yeah, I loved my time at ISDA. It wasn't an easy choice to leave, and it was a great place to learn a lot about Indiana agriculture. As a Missouri farm girl, there are a lot of things that are the same, but I got to dive more deeply into a lot of different sectors of agriculture. You talk about specialty crops and livestock and hardwoods, local food and things like that. I think some of my proudest moments at ISDA often revolved around just team building and getting the team aligned to support goals for agriculture. One of those was our inventory of lost farmland that we did in 2024, a study directed by the legislature to look at how many acres of farmland were lost between 2010 and 2022. And then also some work that we did with home-based vendors back in 2021 or 2022 when we changed that law, allowing for online sales, and just kind of removing some of those hurdles.
Katie, as we talk about that farmland survey and study that you guys did, we are going to talk about that a little bit later on as we talk about Indiana Farm Bureau's legislative priorities for this year. But let's jump right into those, because everyone knows who's involved with Indiana Farm Bureau. There is this long process, and it's a long process because it's a grassroots process. It starts at the county level, moves up to the state level, moves to the national level. There's just a lot to take in here. And out of all of that discussion, you guys have landed on 3 policy priorities. I'll let you explain what they are.
Yeah, thank you for talking about grassroots membership. That's one of the reasons I wanted to come over here to Farm Bureau, because our priorities, when we go to the State House and we talk about them, we know and feel comfortable that our members are the ones that are driving that priority. And legislators like to hear from the farmers on the ground, the folks that this policy is really impacting. And so that was a special part of why I'm in this job. So we did go through the policy development process. On my second day on the job, we did delegate session in August, where our delegates voted to finalize the policy book for the next year. And then out of that, we as a policy team took recommendations to the board to say, here's what we thought the biggest discussions were and what we're hearing also from members. We think this is what you should consider for the policy priorities. And the board, had their own comments and edits to that. And out of that came what you saw in the press release of the 3 buckets. And so would love to talk about those a little bit. On a top level, they are encouraging investment in agriculture, strengthening rural communities, and then supporting farms and farmers.
So, Katie, some can look at this and say, well, those are pretty broad topics. But I think that was kind of the point after some really pointed targets and goals for really this past year. When you look at tax policy and when you look at water policy, very laser focused. And in a budget year, you had to be. In a year like this one, not where we're not working with a budget, it allows you to be a bit more broad in those, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Last year's priorities were water and taxes, and so we were intentionally a little bit more broad this year, but it does allow us to cover a wider breadth of topics because it's difficult to know what the legislature is going to have an appetite for, and also the issues that our members are facing are also wide. And so it's hard to be able to say we just want to focus on this one. We wanted to give ourselves that room.
Well, let's talk about encouraging investment in agriculture. I think that this is something that, really Farm Bureau, whether it's been atop the priority list or not, this has been a priority of sorts for a long time. And obviously we got the tax legislation last year. Probably wasn't I'll say the best solution, but it was probably a better solution than many others that were out there. And I think that right now, just being able to encourage investment in agriculture and make that dollar stretch a little bit farther for farmers, that's kind of where we're going with this, right?
That's right. It is really important to us to stretch that dollar as we look at the farm economy and what our members are facing, frankly, every year, but especially this year as input prices are increasing and land prices and markets are down, and then you add property taxes on top of all of that, and it's going to be really difficult for our farmers to even break even this year, which when you talk to any business person outside of agriculture, it's hard for them to fathom that. And unfortunately, here in agriculture, we're kind of used to just trying to not lose money some years. And so when we look at property taxes in Senate Bill 1, that was really just the start of property tax relief. It was better than not doing anything at all, but we are talking to legislators about it just being kind of the launching point to do more. We're still working on understanding all of the nuances of Senate Bill 1. It was a very complicated bill and it changed a lot of things. And you can look at one section of it and think you understand the impact it's going to have, but you've got to look at the whole thing combined to really understand how that's going to impact folks' property tax bills at the end of the year.
And just to say, this is broad and it's not a property tax focused year, because that's not really what this legislative session is geared toward. What you're saying is those conversations are still happening, because property tax reform is still needed in a big way to make sure that farmers can continue to operate the way they need to operate.
That's right, Eric. It's such a huge I wouldn't say problem, but issue to tackle, that it's not going to be tackled in 1 year. This is going to be a long-term solution. And so the legislators have started that process, and we will continue to be there right in front of it as they continue to make tweaks down the road.
Strengthening rural communities. This is a topic that I know has been top the list for a while, and you can point to Indiana Farm Bureau Vice President and Representative Kendall Culp. I know that he has made several bills that revolve around this, and really it's just about supporting the communities in which our farmers live and making sure that it's a great place to go, because we continue to lose population in those communities. I assume that's what this is all about, along with some of the tax implications of if we take taxes away here, we've got to replace them somewhere. Kind of the balloon that Farm Bureau President Randy Crone has talked about. Where is that money going to come from?
Yeah, that's right. When we look at rural communities, things that we are concerned about and want to make sure are still there for our members and farmers are education, healthcare, emergency services. When you're in rural Indiana and you call 911, you need to be confident that you're going to have a response quickly and reliably. Effective, efficient, responsive local government is kind of the name of the game. And so while property tax relief is really needed, we do have to make sure that we continue to support those communities. In the same bucket, I'll add food security is national security. And if there are ways that we can help our farmers diversify into different food production, so talk about local foods, home-based vendors is a small piece of that, but just even apart from that, the direct-to-consumer sales, how can we, eliminate or lessen regulatory burdens for those producers as they're trying to get their products to market?
And going back to the point here, Katie, of making sure that emergency services are available. When we were going through the property tax discussions, that really was it. Is if you call 911, who's going to show up? And I don't know from my end. After some of the changes have been made, I haven't heard a whole lot more about how communities are doing in responding to that. Are you hearing right now from Farm Bureau members from their communities of, boy, this property tax thing is just not going to work. It has hindered our community in this way. Is that where some of this came from, or is it just to kind of prevent that from happening?
I think it's more preventative at this point. I'm not hearing directly from members that it's not working right now as far as property tax relief causing those problems. I think when you look at Senate Bill 1, most communities are still trying to figure out how they're going to make it work. They are looking at all of those nuances of those bills and trying to look ahead to see what their budgets are going to be like, because we don't really know until it's here. And again, like I said, there's so much in that bill and so many different changes, and there could be more changes on the way. So I think this is more of a seeing what's happening in rural communities right now, apart from property tax reform, and just that there are less and less places to do non-specialty healthcare. You talk about wanting to have a baby. Where do you have a baby in rural Indiana? You're driving 45 minutes to an hour in some places for that kind of care. Talk about emergency room services as well. I grew up in Missouri. This isn't just an Indiana problem. And even in rural Missouri too, it's the same thing. When I was growing up, there was an emergency room 30 minutes from my house. And now if my mom needs to go to the ER, it's about an hour drive either direction. And so those are the same things we're facing here in rural Indiana, and that we want to make sure that we are looking at for our members.
Does this include continuing the push for more rural broadband access for these rural communities as well?
Yes, I think that's definitely part of this bucket as well. As we see more and more innovation and telehealth and education opportunities as well being tied to broadband, that's something that we will continue to push.
Supporting Indiana's farms and farmers. Again, pretty broad, Katie. It kind of seems like that should be the mission statement of Indiana Farm Bureau all the time, and I think that it is. But again, you point out this is an opportunity to reach a bit farther through several different policies. What types of things are in this bucket that you see as a priority for supporting farms and farmers in Indiana?
Yeah, so we talk about the local food use and things in that. That would definitely be part of it. But then moving on, we discussed the inventory of lost farmland that I was a part of at ISDA, which stated that Indiana lost 350,000 acres of farmland between 2010 and 2022. And so we have to make sure that there continues to be prime farmland to grow crops on in the future. And the way we do that is, ensuring that land use and zoning regulations keep in mind modern agriculture, and that if we're looking at siting renewables, that those should be incentivized to be on not prime farmland, on more of that non-productive ground, if possible.
Yeah, we've talked about this, and there's been some legislation put forward at the State House of how do we make it easier to pass the farm from one generation to the next? Because I would assume you would agree with me on this one, Katie, that if we can keep the farm in the family, it has a much better chance of remaining a farm.
Yes, absolutely. And we saw last year Governor Braun, one of his priorities was the tax credit for the new and beginning farmer. That didn't get through, but that's something that hopefully will come up again either this session or next session during a budget year. And that's something that Farm Bureau is pushing for things like that and other programs that do similar things.
I get asked often when I, get asked to speak at things, Katie, of, what could we be doing differently? What could Indiana do to help farmers in this way, to help get the farm to the next generation, to, make things more profitable for farmers? And my answer is typically, God, I don't really know, because Indiana has been historically a very farm-friendly state house to work with. And I know that the state house, they're doing a number of things for farmers, yet farmers are still in kind of this, I don't want to say dire, but it's getting that way for many farmers out there. So I guess I'll pose the question to you. What can Indiana do to help keep farms in the family, to help keep farms?
I think that's the question, Eric, right? That's the one we ask ourselves here in the office is what can we do to actually move the needle and create a system of policies and regulatory system that will support that. And I think if we had the perfect answer, we'd have done it already. I think constantly just looking for those new things, looking at what other states have done with their programs to see if they've worked and if we can do it here. I think it's difficult because, it's not just farmers that are looking at their bottom lines right now. The state has been too, coming from a state agency. I was definitely a part of that when they were looking at the budget the last year. And so, I don't have the answer to that. I think it's probably a mix of all kinds of different things. How can we help farmers diversify their profile as well as supporting them on the other end with services? So.
And again, we mentioned water. That was a laser focus of Indiana Farm Bureau during the last legislative session and other groups as well. We made some headway with water, but it still remains a concern. There's still some more things that need to happen here, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We are in conversations with our state agencies who are partnered with Governor Braun on working on his state inventory as they look to how do they form a framework for a state water plan going forward. And we are making sure that our members, real farmers who are seeing these on the daily, are there at the table as the state looks at what that plan might look like in the future.
And we just never really thought that this would be an issue we'd be tackling of water quantity, but here we are, all really stemming from that pipeline from here where I am in Tippecanoe County headed to Boone County, and it's just raised an awful lot of questions. So off we go and trying to make sure we've got what we need going forward for our farm community. Katie Nelson is here, Executive Director of Public Policy for Indiana Farm Bureau on the Indiana Ag Policy Podcast. Katie, we're going to take a time out. When we come back, there's a big topic that is going around the State House even right now, and the governor's office and the vice president's office. We'll touch on it a little bit when we come back here on the Indiana Ag Policy Podcast. It's presented by the Indiana Corn Growers Association, Indiana Soybean Alliance, and Indiana Farm Bureau.
There is strength in numbers. That's why the Indiana Soybean Alliance membership and policy and Indiana Corn Growers Association need you. These organizations represent Indiana soybean and corn farmers on critical and regulatory issues affecting their industry. Along with support from the national organizations, National Corn Growers Association and American Soybean Association, the Indiana members help determine public policy positions on critical issues, including farm bills, trade policy, and ethanol and biodiesel legislation. Become a member of Indiana Soybean Alliance membership, Indiana Corn Growers Association, or both. Visit incornandsoy.org to select a membership. That's incornandsoy.org.
At Indiana Farm Bureau, we serve tree farmers, goat farmers, and in fact, all farmers. With over 250,000 members, Indiana Farm Bureau represents a broad range of farmers and puts power in your collective voice. You also get advice from our subject matter experts, more affordable health plan options, and support for youth programs statewide. So whether you grow soybeans or strawberries, membership means you'll be heard. Become a member today at INFB.org.
We're back on the Indiana Ag Policy Podcast. Eric Pfeiffer here, your host from Hoosier Ag Today. Katie Nelson is here with Indiana Farm Bureau, their relatively new Executive Director of Public Policy. And Katie, I teased it, coming up that there is a big hot topic going on right now at the State House, and it's redistricting, and there's just a lot of conversation. And I'm not going to ask you for your position or anything else. It's pretty early still for some of that. But my question to you is, with the questions surrounding redistricting and everything else that will happen, is there going to be a lot of legislative work that gets done at the State House in this upcoming session, or is this what it's going to be consumed by, this redistricting conversation?
We don't know yet, Eric, and I don't know when we will know, but I hope it's soon. As a lobbyist, I am ready to get to work on some of our policy priorities, but they have been just not as easy to talk about with legislators when all they're concerned about is redistricting. I would say it's kind of sucked the air out of the room right now. Will they go into special session? How long will it be if they do it? If they do it, will normal legislative session be shorter than even a regular short legislative session? How much time will there be? How much of an appetite will there be to focus on things that our members care about? Or will it be, like you said, all consumed with redistricting?
It's going to be an interesting session, Katie, just from that standpoint, to see what happens and how this moves forward. But as far as bringing some of your policy priorities forward, have you heard of any? Again, it's very early. We're talking about we're still a month away from Organization Day. The session begins in January. But have there been initial conversations with some legislators about potential bills that might be coming to the fore that could impact agriculture and that Farm Bureau would be a part of?
Absolutely. I would say conversations are very early right now, and I haven't seen any PDs yet, but that'll be coming hopefully starting in November and then carrying through December. Again, that is if we don't have a special session. I'll be very curious to see if there's a special session, what does that process look like? Because normally that's when legislators and LSA are drafting bills and getting comments and feedback on them before they're officially filed in January. And so I don't know what that looks like if they're already in the State House busy working on other things.
What is your recommendation? What is your call to action right now for farmers as far as what can be done to make sure that these policy priorities, the policy priorities of farmers, stay top of mind, even though this other stuff is going on?
Yeah, always talk to your legislator. Hopefully you already have a relationship with them, but if not, prioritize creating and strengthening a relationship with them so that especially when we're in session and we're looking at potential bills passing or not passing, you can make those comments to them and then come visit us at the State House too. We would love to have you. Like I mentioned at the very beginning, legislators would much rather hear from our members and farmers than they do want to hear from me every day. And so whenever we can get members in the State House to talk about how these priorities affect them daily, that's always important.
We've touched on a number of things here, Katie, at the state level and some of the priorities there. Obviously, a lot happening at the federal level as well with the government shutdown. And gosh, we've got tensions with China that are affecting the way things are traded. Still hanging out there is the fact that we don't have a farm bill. Just a lot of things that have gone just unchecked here for the farm community, providing additional uncertainty. I assume there's still conversation happening about that there at the Indiana Farm Bureau office as well.
Absolutely. President Crone was just in DC last week talking with the board about all the things: markets, prices, trade, shutdown, bridge payments, and what all that looks like. And there are different opinions on each of those. But I think the important thing is that Congress reach some type of, you know, compromise so that they can open the government back up, because it is starting to affect farmers, and I think it will continue to as FSA offices are closed. That could be really difficult, not to mention not having a farm bill, which who would have thought? It's, October of 2025 that we still wouldn't have a farm bill, and we don't really know when there will be one.
Your guess would be as good as mine, as good as someone else's, as to when something might get done, I think, because we've just been kicking the same can down the road here, Katie. As far as, I assume that yourself, President Crone, Vice President Culp, and Second Vice President Hiley, I assume there are conversations that are happening with the congressional delegation from Indiana to express this, right? I mean, that's kind of Farm Bureau's role in this, is to be that voice out to DC at the Indiana State House. And I assume that those legislators have been at least receptive to hearing what's going on and what can we do to try to help once we do get things back up and running.
Yeah, the delegation has been really receptive to our concerns. Brantley Seifert's on our team, is our national affairs coordinator, and so he talks to the delegation weekly and their staff as well, just to make sure that they're keeping our issues top of mind.
Very good. Well, Katie, again, thank you so much for joining us here on the Indiana Ag Policy Podcast. And I know that we've touched on the grassroots membership, the grassroots organization that makes up your organization. If folks want to get involved, people who are listening to this podcast that think, I don't quite have the strongest voice, or I don't have quite the outgoing personality to go talk with the legislator. There are different ways to get involved and make sure that your policy priorities are heard.
Absolutely. We need everyone's voice, and there are ways to get involved that don't require speaking and that don't require going to the State House. And so if you visit our website at infb.org, there are many ways to get involved, or you can always reach out to us and we'll be happy to plug you in into a spot that fits your strengths and your comfort area, because we need everybody to be moving in the same direction if we're going to make lasting impact.
And you never know, you might just fall in love with it, become a policy wonk yourself, and find yourself being a state legislator, or who knows? You could find your passion there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Katie, again, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome into the position. We look forward to catching up with you on future Indiana Ag Policy podcasts. And again, congratulations on the new gig.
Thanks, Eric. I appreciate it.
And again, thank you so much to Katie Nelson for joining us on today's Indiana Ag Policy Podcast. There are a lot of changes at the top of these organizations. We'll do this again soon, and we'll chat with the new policy head there with Indiana Corn and Soy. Really, the mission remains the same, even with these changes at the top of these policy organizations, that we're just trying to find the best policies for farmers and for agriculture. And again, we'll get some of their priorities coming into this upcoming legislative session on our next edition of the Indiana Ag Policy Podcast, presented by the Indiana Corn Growers Association and Indiana Soybean Alliance, with support from Indiana Farm Bureau. Thanks for joining us. I'm Eric Pfeiffer from Hoosier Ag Today. Until next time, be safe, be well.